So something I've been thinking about for a while is why I don't like Mage Knight that much. I think Mage Knight is a really good game, and I think it's objectively a good game, and I think that objectively it has a lot of the high points that should hook me in. Um, indeed, if you compare it to Magic Realm, in the you explore, you uncover like the map. Now you don't uncover it in Magic Realm as much, but you uncover what's on it. Same thing here. You can hire people. You can fight. You can gain treasures and spells, and those treasures and spells will, those things, those artifacts, and so on, change your game in some fashion. In Mage Knight, it's more leveling up and getting new powers and so on. Uh, but that's what happens, right? So you'd think that it hits all the same high points, and um, and does so actually in a less complicated way, and thus would be a better game, a game that hits my table a lot more. Now, part of the problem with Mage Knight is I hate the setup and teardown of Mage Knight because I hate getting all the cards and then their decks, and once you've mixed and mingled a bunch of cards, like I don't love getting the game out and setting it up. Now, there's a Steam version, Paladin's Oath, plays just like Mage Knight. It's a pretty cool game if you have a Mage Knight craving but don't want to pull the game out on the table. That's a good way to do that. But so okay. But that's beside the point. So why, if this game hits all these points and has all the features, the same feature list as say a Magic Realm in terms of the epic fantasy board game genre, why does this game miss for me? And it hits for a lot of other people, but for me, this is an opinion. This is an opinion piece. Why does it miss for me? And the reason that I believe that it does is because Mage Knight, unlike Magic Realm, going through the motions of Mage Knight, the mechanics do not feel like the thing you're supposed to be simulating. Right? The fighting mechanics, the moving mechanics, the hiring mechanics feel like exactly the same thing, which is I am maximizing my bridge, my hand, my card hand. Mage Knight feels like playing a card game. And though in Magic Realm the mechanics aren't different, aren't that clever, I'm rolling dice to search, or I'm rolling dice to hire a native. It doesn't feel like a card game. And I think that's the difference. There is this mismatch. And don't get me wrong, rolling dice has nothing to do with hiring a person. So you could say, well, the mechanics of Magic Realm don't match what you're doing either. But I think obviously it's been well nigh ingrained in my head, from a child gamer to a middle-aged man gamer, that I can roll dice and look up on a table, and that is how we abstract an action with an uncertain result. Yes or no, right? Um, and it's not that I hate the card game in Mage Knight. I think that it's clever, right? Where you go, okay, how do I maximize this hand? Well, and then you have a little bit of extra with the mana that was rolled that day, and so on. And so it's a clever set of mechanics, but it all feels like I am playing a game of bridge, like I'm trying to maximize my hand, and not like I am doing the thing. Again, for whatever reason, for better or worse, the Magic Realm mechanics do not get in the way of feeling like I'm hiring someone or killing a dragon or getting insulted by natives and fleeing the inn. Um, Mage Knight's mechanics take over and take me out of the game. And that is sort of the weird difference. I've never felt in Mage Knight like I was doing anything or creating a story about doing these things. I always felt like I was playing cards. And so so I thought about it. I said, well, are there other games that have sort of and I realized one thing is that in say video games, I don't like most deck builders. Like Slay the Spire, though it's a good enough game. It's obviously a good game. People love that game. Though it's a good game, I don't enjoy it that much, or I don't enjoy it for it's not a roguelike in my mind because you're just playing cards. You're just building a deck and going, well, attack 3 or block 5 or whatever, right? And even though, I get it, right? There you could just as easily just be rolling dice or whatever, and the cards represent your powers and your fighting style or whatnot. And I go, yes, that's fine, but it doesn't feel like we're doing the thing. It feels like we are manipulating the cards. And so card it's not even that I don't like card mechanics. It just doesn't feel like anything but card mechanics. And I thought about, okay, where else do I feel this? Where else do we see that? And I thought of like the extreme example. The extreme example would be so right and again at some point you're going to go, well, wait a minute. All you're doing is you're bitching about a certain type of abstraction, right? I want to fight a monster. I want to determine if I hit and how much damage I do. Rolling dice is one way to do that, but also drawing cards or moving cards around in your hand is a good way to do that. And it's clever because it's more thought. And I would argue you're right. You're absolutely correct. And every game sort of picks and chooses its abstractions. And I thought, well, let's imagine a tabletop role playing game, and we abstracted combat down to say a game of tic-tac-toe. Right? So think about that game. At some point you are facing down this monster and it's the dragon's huffing and puffing steam through its nostrils and you're drawing your sword or whatever. And then you bust out and you go over here and play a game of tic-tac-toe and the winner wins the fight. And maybe the dragon has tic-tac-toe powers and maybe you have tic-tac-toe maneuvers and so on. And I go, take me out of the game. That's not the same game at that point. There is a dissonance there that harms me, harms that the feeling of that game. And I think actually that's one of the reasons why D&D 4th sort of underperformed. I think D&D 4th is, again, objectively a pretty good game for group-based tactical miniature combat with powers, right? You have characters, fighter types, mage types, cleric types. They all have a role: striker, defender, leader, controller, and they all have their role in the fight. So the controller might be wiping out tons and tons of minions, allowing the striker to get the hits on the big guy, or clearing the path for the striker. The defender is taking attacks to make sure that the controller doesn't die. And it does it very well. Like, it's actually a well-balanced game. Like, if you were, if you wanted to do a tactical team-based combat game, you could do worse than 4th edition. The problem, I think, was, and a lot of people griped, it's like they didn't feel the connection between these combat mechanics and the running through the dungeon or through the adventure and doing the thing mechanics, like doing the rest of it. Like the battles were fine and they worked. And certainly there are skill mechanics in 4th edition and there are dungeoneering mechanics, but it doesn't feel like the two cross over or work together much. I think there is a dissonance, they're out of phase a little bit. And people sort of felt that and said, well, this is a great combat game. I can't run adventures in this, and you really could. If you look just at the rules objectively, I'm not necessarily sure that there's that much difference between D&D fourth and fifth or third with regards to how much mental energy it gives dungeoneering, for instance, or adventuring or overland travel. And yet, I understand, because I also felt that. I said, well, but how do you run it? What do we do in a dungeon with this? Like, none of these mage powers make any sense with regards to any of this the other, pillars of D&D, exploration, and adventure and so on. So again, there's this dissonance. There's this weird, I feeling bad about that mechanic. And it keeps me on. And then I thought, well, are there any cases where you had sort of a wonky mechanic, but that does fit? And I thought about it, like a totally different mechanic. In most games, cast a spell, you either do it and mark it off your sheet, or you do it and roll your skill roll and get some kind of effect roll and mark it off your sheet, or whatever. And again, I think those mechanics are ingrained in us, and they do not take us out of the moment. There's no dissonance there. They could be bad mechanics, but they do not make you think, oh, all of a sudden I'm playing a different game. And so I thought about it, and I thought, what about the Huckster in Deadlands? So the Huckster in Deadlands, to count, effectively rolls, and then that roll allows them to draw 5 or more poker cards from a standard deck with a couple jokers. And based on the hand that they make is whether the spell succeeds or they get a cooler version or whatever. And of course, there's pressure luck. You could draw a lot of cards, but then if the black joker comes up, you get screwed. That kind of thing. And again, that's totally outside of the rest of the mechanics of the game, in the sense that, it's not, you don't use the poker deck all the time. You use it for this thing. It's not a poker-based RPG. It's a Western, fantasy, weird Western. And that has a little bit to do with it, right? It fits in the theme really well. But in and of itself, drawing poker cards for this as a mechanic should be wrong. It should take you out of it, and it doesn't, because it fits just so damn well that you can sort of see it, right? You can sort of feel it. So I do think there's ways to have have differing mechanics that do not invoke dissonance. But I don't think Mage Knight does that for me. And again, this is a personal thing. A lot of people like Mage Knight. So I'm not disparaging Mage Knight. But there's a reason why it does not hit the table that often. And I don't, and if I'm getting a game out to do that experience, I'll get out Magic Realm, which arguably is a bigger pain in the butt than a Mage Knight. Because all those mechanics seem to work together and do not make me think, oh, now I'm playing the other game. So that's all. It's not a huge deal. It's not that clever or anything, but it's just a thought of, why one game works for me and why another game, works for someone else. And I think that's one reason why. I just never, in Mage Knight, I always felt like I was just playing cards as opposed to something else. So anyway, that's it. Thanks a lot. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.